Lowe's has the Labor Day deals you need to give your home a new look. Buy one, get one free select interior paint via Visa gift card rebate. Then, add the final touch with 2 for $8 on select 2.5 or 3-quart mums. Refresh your home and save big while doing it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 9/3. Mums offer in-store only. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. More terms and restrictions apply. See Lowes.com/rebates for details.
This is Betsy Kulikowski, best-selling author of the Veritas Codex Paranormal Thriller series, and you're listening to Ghost in the Valley podcast.
Hello and welcome to Ghost in the Valley podcast. I'm your host, Al Cooley. Today I'm doing a playback from 5 years ago, Berkshire's UFO that was released on Netflix through the Unsolved Mysteries series, and this was the UFOs over the Berkshires. On this episode, you're going to hear Thom Reed, Melanie Kirchdorfer, and Tom Warner. You can catch all three on the episode of UFOs over the Berkshires on Netflix. Google it, YouTube it. It is fantastic. Without further ado, Thom Reed. I want to thank you for being on the show today, Tom.
Oh, not at all. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I mean that sincerely.
Before we get into the 1969 event, let's talk a little bit about before the UFO. Growing up, did you ever have any experience with UFOs?
Prior to 1969?
Prior to 1969, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was actually supposed to be covered in the first segment layout, if you will, or the way the Unsolved was to be filmed. They were going to focus on 1966, 1967, where I used to sit on top of our family stable and look out, and I felt very detached from, the other kids back in the day, and how, certain children would come into our diner, and you could see in their eyes and feel that we weren't the only ones who had experienced something prior to that, and Melanie is one of those people. And so when I first saw how they were going to film this, it was really about our farm more than anything, and our diner. We went out and actually bought a jukebox to replicate the jukebox that was in our diner, and we had put a lot of time into laying out a scene where certain children who had this experience got together and started to maybe a little bit recluse, with respect to how they were with, throwing the ball around, which no longer seemed to interest us. We seemed to have gotten more, cliquey and stayed with ourselves. The kids that had the experiences, and how the kids were drawing what they had seen, and taping them to the bottom of the chalkboard on the lip where the chalk would go in school, and the fights on the bus, and that kind of thing, how it started to divide the community. Because 69 wasn't what really divided the community. In some respects, it brought it back together. Because it was 67, really, those years between 67 and 69, when our family, being New Yorkers, being from outside, we were out, let's say we were outsiders to begin with. So, talking about this sighting that I had, and my brother and my mother and grandmother prior to 69, we became kind of a target in a lot of ways. And there were a lot of fights that broke out in our diner, which is how, again, that friction, that turbulence, that push and shove situations, that seemed to come on a regular basis in our diner by those who had difference of opinion. And that is where how our diner later on was looked at as altering the natural progression of the community. But my brother and I, we remember vividly an incident in 1967, and it did involve my mother. 69 was very different for us, because when we came over that bridge, my grandmother had seen the lights, or a light, bleed of light, through the planks of the bridge. She didn't really mention that till later, but she did notice that there was an odd, the light going through the bridge was bright, but the lights coming through the planks of the boards were brighter. And you could see it. And it wasn't like coming from our car, it was coming through the bottom of the bridge. And when we got through to the other side, I was giving my brother a candy. I've said this all my life. And that's what caused my grandmother to turn around and look behind us through the back window of the station wagon to see this sphere. And the sphere that arose from the bank of that left side of the bridge. And I've tried to describe it in a lot of different ways, but I found a new way to word this. It was like an illuminated cue ball from a pool table. I used to say a bubble, because it was so defined on the edges. And but it wasn't translucent like that. It was solid. It rose, and these two, or maybe more, I just remember a couple of rods of light that shot into the waterway, into the Housatonic River. And then I don't know if it dissolved or it was a long time ago, but then they were gone. Those rods had either gone back into it or just dissolved. And that sphere rose up and went along the other side of the tree line. And then my brother, we were all trying to find it again because we really didn't know where it went because there was a tree line in between the road and where the sphere went. And my brother was looking to the right, the left, we're all looking around, and we saw a second one, which was over water as well. It looked orange, and it seemed to have a moving center to it, whether it looked like lava or a wave or something. And my brother had to better look at that because as we were growing, that would come and go in vision because there was a lot of obstacles in the way of that. And that's when everything felt funky to us. We felt like we were underwater. I say underwater. My mother uses like close, like the atmosphere was close to us. But I grew up, for the most part, I lived in Florida for a long time. And so while you're in the eye of a hurricane, you don't hear anything. There's no sound. The wildlife is affected by what's coming or what has been or still getting acclimated to this change. And that was what it was like going down this dirt road. It was almost like we were submerged in the low part of a swimming pool, yet these sounds, I'll never forget the sounds that hit the back of our, I say hit the back of our car because it sounded like stones hitting underneath the fender wall. It was like, and it echoed, it was loud, but everything else was like muted. And I was behind my mother, who was driving. My grandmother was in a passenger seat. My brother was to the right. And it was dark, so you couldn't see in the car. The headlights were on. We're coming to a stop. We all felt like this. We all just kind of felt like we were becoming placid. And my mother, the windows were open. It was very hot that night. My mother had actually stopped the car at this point. The headlights were on. The car was running. And we were looking out over the field, where Marcus and I filmed. And even going back today, I used to think as a child, maybe what I remember was, I was small, so maybe everything seemed larger, right? I went back there with Marcus and the crew, very professional crew, by the way, best crew I've ever worked with. And we looked over the field, and you can still see to this day. I mean, it was a good 100 yards between those trees where it hovered. I mean, it was huge. And even though the bottom of it put out a little bit of a light, it wasn't that light that made it possible to see the craft. It was like the shell or the skin of it illuminated. Yeah. Off to the right side of it, it was orangey, goldish, had patches in it, like a pewter, but it was almost like someone had taken a blowtorch and heated up some metal and how it cools at different temperatures. The right side was very much like that. The left side was darker for some reason. I obviously don't know why. It just hovered about 3 stories high. It looked like a turtle shell because I do remember lines in it or patterns to it. But what was interesting, too, is that the center of it didn't come to like a point or anything like you see on, whatever online. The middle of it was as fat as the top and bottom. I mean, it was wide. It was like if you took the top and bottom of the craft and put it together, that's how fat the middle would be. So the middle was twice the size of the top and bottom. And when I say the middle of it, I mean it was like almost a flat, like a snake skin that went around the middle of it. It wasn't all that impressive, in today's standards, right, or what you see. It was very plain. I didn't see any windows. I mean, I wasn't looking for windows back then. I wasn't looking for landing gear because when you see something like this and you're standing there, you're in awe, right? You are just like, it's it's not like if I saw it today. I think if I saw something like that today, I'd be thinking of all the things that it meant, what could be possibly happening, right? Is this the end of times, right? I mean, but when you're a child, you're not looking at that. You're just amazed by what you're seeing. And so I was just staring at this thing. And what's my mother says, well, they weren't hurt, when she was on, she did the behavior panel with me. She was saying, well, this wasn't like we were really hurt, because to her, she's more thinking about what this means, or what is going to happen next. And she was more worried about that. Whereas for me, I was just amazed by what I was seeing. And to put this into perspective too, and again, it wasn't really making any noise. My brother says he kind of remembered a rhythmic, woo, 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 like that. That's something he mentions. And then, we all, like I said, we all just felt a little out of it. And then, the car just lit up. I mean, it wasn't like a dome light. I mean, it was like a blast of light into our car. And at that point, I could see the dashboard. I could see the back of my mother's head. I could see my grandmother. You could see everything. I mean, it was just like someone had put, bunch of fluorescent tubes in your car, right? I mean, it's just like you couldn't even see out the window. I mean, the whole thing was just, and it didn't last long. It was just like, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and then all of a sudden, what seemed like, here's the other thing too. We're like in this funk, so I don't know how long we were like that. I don't know if that was minutes. I don't know if it was seconds. But after this happened, it was just like, we heard life come back. We heard the crickets, the cadians. I've mentioned that before. There were frogs, all the things that shh. You heard that shh. That sound you get. And then bang, we weren't in the car anymore. So it went from being like underwater to light that fired into our car, I guess, and then nothing, and then shh, and out. It was like almost in stages like that. And at least it seemed like that to me. And I remember being in it reminded me of an airplane hangar. I'm not saying it was. That's kind of what it reminded me of. There were fluorescent tubes, or what looked like fluorescent lights or tubes in the corners of the walls that met the ceiling. I remember a glassed-in wall that bowed inward. I was grabbed by my left arm. It hurt. And this area that I was in was much bigger than the craft itself, So I don't know where I was. And that's one of the reasons I also don't use certain verbiage or terminology, because I don't know how we were taken or removed from the vehicle. And I don't know how we got back. And something else that's very interesting to me is that when we did come to in the vehicle, my grandmother was in the driver's seat. Now, my mother was in the passenger seat. I was where I was when this whole thing started, and my brother's head was on my right knee. He was out. The car was off. The headlights were off. My grandmother came to first in the driver's seat, and she instinctively tried to wake up my mother. Nobody was responding. We were just, whatever happened, we were out. So she, who didn't usually drive much, she had a driver's license, but she didn't drive very much. She took the car down the road here. It was Old Covered Bridge Lane, I guess. Turned it around and went back into town for help, because we lived like maybe 5 to 7 miles away. Town was only like a mile away, so she went to town for help. And when she started going to town, she actually was so out of it, she missed the entrance, actually, turned around and came back into town. And when she got out of the front door, I believe it was the slamming of the door that woke me. Or it was just a coincidence that I came to about the time that she got out of the vehicle. And nobody was responding to me. She was walking into Silks. The only person that was awake was my grandmother, so I opened the door and called to her. And, and she didn't wait for me. I just kind of got out and went to her, Nana, and when we got into Silks, she finally got to the person behind the counter. She walked right by him, and she went to the back of the store and got tangled up between bikes and strollers and stuff like that. And I was trying to grab her hand, and, I was scared. But my grandmother was, even though she was awake and driving, she was kind of either out of it or got there and didn't know what to ask for help for. But there were no paramedics. No paramedics showed up. The police didn't show up. My grandmother talked to the clerk for a minute or two on the way out. and realized that it was almost 11 o'clock, I guess, and we had left the diner around 8:30. And so I was gone, or we were all gone out of the car from 8:30 to almost 11 o'clock, which is the same time that Melanie was out of her car. And Melanie was in a car of 4 people. We were in a car of 4 people. She was at a lake. We were at the river. She was in a car of 4 people. I was in a car of 4 people. We had a lot in common with regard to that night. But we got back in the car and we drove home, and it wasn't until the next morning when everybody was in our diner having breakfast that the calls started to come over the radio, And September is about the time school starts, so it wasn't really loaded with kids because it really didn't, start yet. But a lot of the people were hearing the broadcast. What was this? What did they see? What's going on? And which kind of helped our family in a lot of ways, because until 1969, no one else had really seen anything or admitted seeing anything. And so because this was witnessed by so many people, it actually kind of helped our family more than it hurt it. It was 67, the years between 67 and 69 that made it difficult for us.
It's like 51 years ago, and it's like yesterday, comes back to you. Do you feel that maybe sometimes you wonder why maybe your family was targeted?
Yeah, I do. We've had a lot of discussion about that. This is speculation, but there is a lot of talk about our families. O negative. I'm O negative. My brother's A negative. The Rh negative gene. There's 9 of us. O negative blood was the only blood tracked by the U.S. government back in the 60s because it was the universal donor, during the time of Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
We had Pratt & Whitney, Sikorsky Aircraft, General Electric, the Groton Naval Base, Electric Boat. We were surrounded by government manufacturing facilities, and Sheffield is pretty high. It's about 2,000 feet above sea level, and our farm in this area was pretty high up. So there's a combination between, I believe government or a form of the government was involved in this, because what I believe removed us from the vehicle was human. Where we were, we were sitting here with three objects, right? 3 off-world objects. There's no question of what, was off-world. And we were in this middle of this triangle of 3 pieces. And we were affected by something. And there has been reports of government coming out of the woods, seeing vehicles in the area. The magnesium for the atom bomb was mined just 3 miles from my monument or a restaurant. And so what were we really caught up in? I don't know. But, it's been going on for a long time. Even in 2013 and 2014, there are reports of crop circles in the area, which is online. You can Google it, BLT research, Sheffield crop circles. It's all over the place. They still see these spheres today, over the area. Gina Paul and Marissa Paul used to walk to school with us. They were having a barbecue that night because it was Labor Day. It was a holiday. That's why so many people saw it, because it was a holiday weekend. And a lot of people were getting together and having these barbecues that may not have normally socialized with each other, but because it was a mixed group of people of all ages and they all saw it, is why it had, over 200 and something witnesses. And so it was never a matter of did something happen. It was simply a matter of what was it. And that's how I think we were very lucky or fortunate to have had so many witnesses to this thing. And with the radio station and the credentials of some of those witnesses, and the loss of my father on the same day this went to the United Nations, collectively, it made history. What was it? I don't know if those spheres were any more than anybody else, but they weren't ours. Yeah, I think that it was more the struggles and the hurdles that we had afterwards with the neighbors and friends, for a long time, which hurt my mother. My mother was 29 years old, and she owned 80 acres of property. We had a huge house, raised horses. We had the restaurant. My mother later became a radio personality for KZE FM. My grandmother was the governess for Franklin Delano Roosevelt's grandchildren. My father ended up getting in politics and became a selectman and an attorney. So we're an accomplished family that didn't really want to, taint our careers by any means, because back in the day it was a different time. But you'll hear in Unsolved Mysteries and others that we didn't want to talk about it. That's not true. We talked about it all the time. Jan Green may not have wanted to, and some other people may not have wanted to, but our restaurant was where the talk took place. Now, did I go out to baseball games and talk about it? No, friends, sure. We used to walk the railroad tracks and put pennies on the railroad tracks and flatten them out, and one-on-one with your friends, you talk about it when you're away from things. But in the restaurant, it was like you get your hair done. That's the way my grandmother used to, kind of describe it. When you get your hair done, your hairdresser knows more about you than anyone else. But that's kind of how a restaurant was when that door shut and you were having a coffee shake after school, or you're having some fried. My mother made really good French fries. She used to deep fry French fries in bacon fat, and they were awesome. So we were known for our French fries, believe it or not, and shakes. And here's the other thing. This will give you an idea. Our diner was the only area in town back in the day where you could listen to music. WSBS radio was an AM news station. That's why they reported it to WSBS, more so than the police department. Not to mention, it didn't really happen in Great Barrington. It happened in the town next to it, Sheffield. But, you could come in our diner and listen to the Stones or Creedence or whatever you wanted for a dime or a quarter, whatever it was. Get something to eat and munch out, a little bit. And it was very alive with that jukebox. So that is another reason that so many people came there and listened. And then, to my mother, what she had to say, or our family, and would talk about it. So our diner was really the hub for conversation. So to hear, we never talked about it. Of course we did. We've talked about it our whole lives. Back in the 80s during the Hudson River Valley sightings, my father was approached by a friend of his who was also an attorney in Manchester, Connecticut, who lived not far from my condo, Robert Bletchman. And Robert Bletchman at the time was the public relations director for MUFON. We didn't know what MUFON was any more than anyone else at the time. He was very interested in the connection between the Hudson River Valley sightings over the water and the Great Barrington or Sheffield R incident over the Housatonic River. And then there was a little bit of interest in Cash and Landerman in Texas, how the environment was affected around her vehicle, and how was there a connection or anything similar with respect to Cash and Landerman. And so in 1992, when Robert had finally put something together with Mohammed Rabidin, who was the president of the Parapsychology Society, of course, out of respect for my father, he asked him if it was okay if he mentioned our case, because, if my father had aspirations to go further in politics, you didn't want to, who knows who would have picked it up. You didn't want to hurt my father's opportunities. And so my father said, sure, as long as you don't go too far with it, And Stanton Friedman was there, too, which is one of the reasons when we got inducted into the Historical Society, and we're getting now added to the museum in Roswell, which Stanton Friedman was instrumental in making that museum what it is today. He was very happy about that we made history, because he was also at the United Nations Symposium where our case was discussed in 1992. And so that's why the telescope is being donated to our park. And, of course, I think it was 14 years later when my father wanted to finally write about it, discuss, bring with the papers that he had seen or gotten back from the UN address, which I still have, which is going in a book. Finally, I'm writing a book. He lost his life on the same day. And that's kind of how the Historical Society had said, okay, this is there's too much here. We need to look into this. And they did. They called WSBS Radio. They talked to him about what happened and the fact that they might still be the tapes, even though they said there may not be tapes. Tom Jay's wife is still alive to this day, who was the disc jockey for the radio station. And there is a possibility that some of the copies of the tapes might be in Arizona, where his children live today. There was boxes of tapes sent there, so apparently there is a chance that they do exist, because from what I understand, when this was going to the UN, those tapes were actually replayed. So there are people that remember hearing the broadcasts replayed in early 90s or late 80s.
It'd be nice to get some of these calls, that came in that didn't make the Netflix Unsolved Mysteries series. You talked about your book you're writing. When you think that'll be out?
I'm about, 80 to 100 pages in. I think, I wanted to have it done by October, but it's not going to happen. It probably won't be finished till next summer. There's so much to write about. We're going to start with the ending because it's current, and it just keeps going, right? I mean, it keeps growing. I mean, even to this day, I mean, it's we're seeing that heartfelt from people we don't even know. They just seem to feel compelled to go to the park and donate something. And I'm not somebody who looks at what happened and feels traumatized by it. I'm more traumatized by the behavior of people these days than I am what really happened. I feel it was a privilege to see what I did. It was a privilege to be part of that. Did it blow my mind, and did it, steer my career and as a photographer and a fashion photographer, and to get into follow the career that I did with cameras and that kind of thing? Sure. Is that a bad thing? No, I love who I am. I think I've done well for myself. We adjusted. We weren't, destroyed by it. Did we have to move and make new friends and leave a community that my mother loved because she just loved the Norman Rockwell feel, and that was to be the life she wanted for her family and the horses? Yeah, I mean, that destroyed any opportunity to have that kind of a life. But at the end of the day, together we made history, that kind of thing, and now it's time to write the book about it, to preserve what really happened. And I need to do it, but my God, it's just like every time you turn around, it's like there's more things. We've got more and more statements from people that are witnesses that are notarized. More and more witnesses are coming out of the woodwork. We're learning more and more about, the magnesium spill and things like that. So, we think we have all these chapters laid out, and, so we're still writing the ones that we can. But I would say midsummer, I think we'll finally be finished with this thing. I do think the monument's going to come back. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk about Unsolved for a minute.
Sure.
So Unsolved Mysteries, I first started talking with Cindy Boyle. Yeah, I first started talking with Cindy back in 2016, I believe it was. At first, we were going to really focus on her family. But my brother bailed. My brother didn't want to do it. And I think he's just kind of tired of the whole thing. He's tired of the silliness and the circus that follows it, and feels that we've pretty much done enough. And so when he didn't want to participate, my mother decided I'll step in for Matthew. It was the first time she had ever opted to ever go on camera. And the reason she did was we were promised that our family's credentials and our documents would be shown in the episode. That was promised to me for 4 straight years. It was also promised to my mother if she stepped in on behalf of my brother. So I took all the documents, and we were at the bridge, and they had computers running out there, the whole bit, battery operated, whatever. And we made copies, gave all the copies to Unsolved on location. And unfortunately, none of it was shown. And to me, that really wasn't fair to us, because we didn't need to do another show. We only did it because we were promised that for once, my mother's late husband's credentials and everything that he did in support of this incident, to lose his life on the same day that our case was mentioned at the United Nations, was finally going, that his efforts were, and my mother strongly believes it was connected to this case, as a lot of us do. My mother, the building that my father worked in was closed down. There were new ceiling tiles put in his office. His computer was wiped out. It was mentioned in the New York Times. So for my mother to get the, pull the strength together, she just had a heart attack, but, she just had heart surgery. To opt to do this and to talk about something that in her mind destroyed her family, and the loss of her husband, to finally do this for him and have his credentials shown meant a lot to her. And for Unsolved to not keep their word, for lack of a better way to describe it, and they didn't, really bothered my mother a lot. And so I'm hoping that in this reboot, or in October when they have the follow-up, that they'll do that. Because when we watched it with my mother on the love seat here and ended without showing any documents, she was beside herself. And my brother called up and said, "See, I told you, that's why I said I wasn't going to do it." Now, I like Unsolved Mysteries, and I like the crew a lot. And I realize that probably some of the editing came on behalf of Netflix, not so much Unsolved. I think it brought a lot of attention. It showed the flight pattern. It showed a lot of other people that were witnesses to it that night, and how significant it was. And they did a good job with it. but I just think it could have been so much more powerful. So I'm hoping that it's not over. I'm hoping that they'll do the right thing and introduce some of these documents and the credentials like they said they would. At the end of the day, it was a good show. I mean, they did a good job with it. Jan Green was terrific. Marcus did a great job. I like Marcus. We got along great. The crew was fantastic. If you see some of the posts and the blogs are like, well, how come there's no documentation? How come there's no this? How come the police department in Great Barrington didn't have any records? Well, if you, for instance, it didn't happen in Great Barrington, first of all, and the calls that came into the radio station, and the police department in Great Barrington, they had a ringed binder from way back when. Any page could have been taken out of that. This was a holiday weekend with people drinking. This was a holiday weekend where things happen, and they only had 2 incidences in that report, one with beer cans or something. It would have been very easy to take the page out. Or maybe there was another report on there that they didn't want to mention or show. But that's almost impossible when you had 200 and something callers, and you had even Sheffield, even Eddie Galata on the show talks about how he got in a police car with his father, who was the chief of police, and drove out looking for this thing. So you've got a police department that went looking for this thing on that night with his son, yet the bigger town next door doesn't even have a report in the book. None of that made sense to me.
Thank you, Thom Reed, for that interview. I did a second interview with Thom Reed and Judge Titus. You can go back to Season 2 and pull up that interview. My heart goes out to Tom's mother, Nancy Reed. I know that without the documentation being put in the release of the Unsolved Mysteries, Berkshire's UFO did not come at the hands of Marcus Clarke, Doug Sackmann, or Justin Janowitz at all. I've talked to all 3 of those who were behind the scenes, director, photography, and special effects, and so that was still out of their control. As far as they were concerned, it was going to be put in. I understand their displeasure with it not being put in the series, especially with Tom's father passing away on the day it went to the UN. Coming up next is Melanie Kirchdorfer. This is my second interview with Melanie because I did an interview with her the first time, and some weird stuff happened inside my house while doing this interview as the power went out and my file on my Windows computer was missing, and she asked me if she did that because of her energy level since she was abducted. So here is my interview with Melanie Kirchdorfer from 5 years ago. Well, good afternoon, Melanie, and thank you for returning.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me, Al.
And I explained all the glitches I had in the pre-show opening, so they know all about what happened.
Our little freak adventure.
Before we get into the abduction, probably overwhelmed with all the attention you've been getting the last few weeks from the Unsolved Mysteries series.
I wasn't expecting it, let me put it that way. I'm not getting as much attention as the guys are getting because I don't put anything out there. People are finding me, whereas they have Facebook pages about it. I don't have any Facebook pages about it. I have no book intentions or anything like that. So any contacts, people have contacted me, which it's fine. It's fine. I've actually enjoyed it. I've been working. Thom Reed has contacted me and asked me to do some shows, and he's really fun to work with. I've had fun working with him, which has been nice. So I never planned on doing this. It wasn't something that I planned on doing, but I've been enjoying it. The people that I've met have been lovely, very lovely people. So it's kind of a healing process for me because it was so traumatic for me. So this is my time for healing. That's how I look at it, because I've met so many kind people going through this process.
Yeah, I was talking to Tom Warner, and he was telling me how somebody had told him, "You're so lucky that how did this happen to you?" And he says, no. At the time it's you're not lucky. I mean, something like that just falls upon you like that. Are you the chosen one? Why me?
Well, Tom's a sweetheart too, and I'm very close with him as well. He's, we keep in contact constantly, Tom and I. He's like a brother to me, and we keep in touch during the week. We don't really talk about this anymore, though. We talk about other things, our families and such. Yeah, the whole thing's crazy. It's really crazy because I didn't know him as a little boy, but I know him better as an adult now. Our families know each other now, but we don't really talk about the whole UFO incident. We've become more immersed as family, I would say, than the UFO subject.
Yeah, by me talking to a few of the production assistants from the Unsolved Mystery crew that came and did your research and everything, they were telling me they knew it was going to be a hit, but they didn't know it was going to take off like it did.
Really?
They knew it was because they signed like I guess what I was told, a 6-part series. So there's another 6 parts coming, 6 episodes coming up, being released sometime this year. So when they threw in that UFO segment, episode 5, it was like, he says, one of their most watched programs ever. I figured you guys really, you might have got overnight success and not even known it,
I had no idea how big it is because I hear it from other people. I hear it from the 2 Toms, and then I hear it from my husband. He tells me about it. That's how I find out about it. But, or my sons will tell me about it. I personally, I don't hear about it because I don't post any of this on my own Facebook page. I guess I'm more private about it. And then the guys will tell me about it. That's how I find out about it, which it's interesting. I think that the 2 Toms, they're more, well, Tommy Warner, he's writing a book. I know that. So that's probably why he has his page. This is his passion and also his painting. So it's really his passion. It's something that he's been doing. And Tom has the park that he's been working on for everybody. He's hoping to get the park together for everyone, not just him. My husband and I, we want to donate a picnic table for the park. So they have their passions and their reason. And I guess I'm just kind of dumbfounded over the whole situation because I haven't been thinking about it as long as them because of what had happened to me as a child. I was told not to talk about it and that it never happened and don't even think about it. Whereas they had a better support system than I had. So it's different for me. I really only had my sister. That's it.
Are you still in the area?
I'm in Stockbridge. It's just a town over. One town over.
Okay, is that in Berkshire County?
Oh, yeah. It's in the same school district, everything. It's generations, the same generation, same hospitals, same people.
And that's actually the same place where Jane Green seen the UFO to start the show out with.
Right. We have a lot of sightings here, too. Actually, my husband and the other Tom, we ran into someone. My husband ran into someone and said, "Oh, I saw Melanie on Netflix." And, that same night, I saw 6 UFOs that were heading in that same direction towards Glendale right before Jane Green saw it. I was in Stockbridge in the Main Street area, and it was heading right towards where Jane Green saw it that same night. He was just a kid. His family lived right on the main street of Stockbridge.
And, and since I talked to you last, been reaching out on Facebook and different groups, paranormal groups, and to try to contact more people that didn't come forward or, weren't part of the Netflix series. That, maybe there might be some other people that witnessed this. And I've been overwhelmed with responses from people who seen like 6 or 7 in a V formation. I was excited to get these emails, 51 years later.
Well, fortunately, my friend Patty, she lives on Cherry Street. I spoke to her today because a woman called me about a case that she heard about where a man disappeared in Michigan, and then he showed up a year later in Great Barrington. And she would like to write a book about him, but he won't talk. He won't talk about it. My friend went to school with the relative of him. And my friend has photographs of 2 UFOs from Cherry Street. And this woman, this writer, asked if I would give her the telephone number of my friend. And I said I had to ask permission. And fortunately, my friend Patty is giving me permission for this woman to contact her. So it is hard to get people to come forward because people think you're crazy.
Exactly. Yes.
It took me 61 years before I got permission from my parents to come forward. And it wasn't even permission, really. It was a very bizarre situation, what happened. And people think you're crazy. They just don't. They tell you as a child that it's not happening, that it's all in your head. And you begin to believe it.
Right. I'll tell you one thing is, yeah, you're labeled crazy or you're out there. But on the other hand, which I found, I still believe, is a huge, huge cover-up from the government that doesn't want these things out there.
I believe that.
And I think that's why I'm being targeted a lot on a lot of my stuff being hacked into and missing. But I want to keep on putting it out. It's just virtually impossible to have an airport, an air traffic controller right near these things. And you can't tell me you see 7 UFOs over your base. It's just unbelievable to me.
Well, I think it's awful funny that the police department had nothing on it either that night.
And I've had calls coming in that say they left messages at the police department when they say they didn't have nothing. So why do I have people telling me they left a message? One lady even said she was even labeled like, "What are you drinking tonight?" So it's like you're already labeled, like you said, either crazy or drunk or on something, And so I can understand why a lot of people didn't come forward. I'm glad that you and Tom Warner and Thom Reed, Jane Green, y'all came forward to share your story.
And I have heard that swamp gas theory many times before, too. I've heard people say, "Oh, it's just swamp gas. It's just swamp gas." So Jane wasn't the first person that was told that before.
And growing up, have you witnessed anything like this before the abduction?
I've had them before, and then I had them again afterwards, yes. I did. As a child, I had them. It started when I was 4 years of age. When it happened, the 69 incident happened when I lived on 55 Castle Street in Great Barrington. But my first incident started on that I can remember. It could have happened when I lived on Cottage Street, thinking back now. I probably was 2 when I think back now. But I know for a fact in my mind, and from I told you that I had to go to a PTSD specialist for a couple of months, I would say 3 months. I went for PTSD therapy, and I know that it happened starting at 4 years of age. And what happened was there were these little gray men that would come into my room, particularly one. And I kept telling my parents, I kept telling them, and they would not believe me that this was happening. They would say that my brother had an imaginary friend. My sister saw it. She said that he looked like a troll. She saw him out in the tree. But he would come in my room and then just take me. It was so bad that my father, there was an attic in my room, because I would go up into the attic and I would be levitated up into the attic and then out the window and down through always the river, always the Housatonic River or water. A body of water was always involved. And my sister believed me. She would always know that it would happen because I'd always get back into bed with her when I'd finally get back. But my parents, the attic door was right in our bedroom. And finally, he put all these big locks, those bolt locks on my attic door. But it didn't matter because they could still get through it. And I found out after Netflix from a classmate of mine, the same thing was happening to her sister on a street over on Dresser Avenue. But her family believed her. Her parents believed her. And they moved to Stockbridge instead of Great Barrington. It did stop for her, but I think it's because she had the support system of her parents, where I didn't. So they wouldn't pay attention to me. They would just be angry with me.
I think that makes it tough for the child, to deal with that your parents don't believe you, and also dealing with the trauma that's happening.
Exactly. I mean, I actually got locked in the basement one night because of it, just to shut me up. And my mother found me one night sleepwalking around. It must have been after an incident when they dropped me back off. And she's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I don't remember her sleepwalking in her bedroom. She said, I just said, hi, Ma, hi. And then she walked me back into my room. But I have videotapes of being hypnotized, going through all of this, going back through this. Because I went to a PTSD specialist to find out exactly what happened. And you have to go for 4 weeks to prepare yourself for the trauma of what happened before they'll even hypnotize you for 4 to 6 weeks, however long. They have to prepare you for it, because some people cannot do it because you could have a nervous breakdown. It's so traumatic. It's like looking at a movie of your past life. So they have to know if you're going to be ready to see what you're going to see. Like I said, they work with soldiers and they work with police officers, rape victims. This man is himself. He was a soldier. I believe he was in the Marines that does this hypnosis work, and it's very serious what you have to do, and it's not a one-time thing. You know how people will go to have hypnosis done in a one-time thing. It's a series of things that you have to go through. And it's pretty amazing. I can remember the color of the bedspreads in my bedroom when I was 4 years old. I can remember songs that my sister and I were singing. My sister was like, I can't believe that you can remember all these things. And then she would remember when I would tell her. But it's pretty crazy. It was scary. And he wanted me to continue. But I found out enough. Enough was enough. Maybe in the future, I'll go back and find out more. But it was very, very hard for me to do. And I did keep the tapes. It's frightening to watch them, but I have them. Like I said, maybe in the future, I will continue to do it. But right now, I know enough. It's just a really scary thing. My other incident I had was, I would say I was in my 40s. I still had an exchange student living with me. I used to be the American Intercultural Student Exchange person for this area. So I would place exchange students into other homes, and we always had exchange students here. And I remember one night there was a bright light around my house, so bright. And I'm like, oh my God, they're here again. I thought I was going to be too old by then for them to want anything. And I tried to wake everyone in the house up, even the animals. And I could not wake anyone up. No one. The cats, the dogs. I'm a big animal lover. And nobody would wake up. So I just climbed into bed and I pulled the covers over me. And I don't know what happened after that. It was like a fog. And then the next morning, I ran into a friend of mine. She's no longer with us either. I've lost a lot of friends at a very young age. And I said to her, April said to me, you look awful. What's wrong with you? And I said, I had a really weird night last night. And she goes, why? And I said, you're going to think I'm nuts. And I told her about the bright light. And she said, no, I don't think you're nuts at all. Because my husband and I went to a funeral. We were all outside. She said some people were having cigarettes outside at this funeral. And they looked up and there were some UFOs once again over Cherry Street. They went and reported it at the police station. And whatever police officer was working that night in Stockbridge said that there was a doctor on Cherry Hill, and I don't know which doctor because there's a couple of doctors that live on Cherry Hill, that had been watching them up on Cherry Hill for the past few years. So it has to be a hot spot because that's right about the area that Jane Green saw the UFO. It was pretty scary because apparently that's what's been happening right around this whole Stockbridge area. But I don't remember anything happening to me that night. I just remember the light and that I couldn't wake anyone up that night.
We'll be right back with Melanie Kirchdorfer right after these messages. So this is 51 years ago today that this incident happened. You want to lead us through the abduction?
Sure. First of all, I should probably tell you what happened, how I even came into this whole thing. What happened to me was I was told that it didn't really happen by my parents. And ironically, I found out from Thom Reed that my mom had been contacted in 2013, and she'd been going back and forth with people in Oregon about this whole thing, but she'd been telling me that this never took place. I mean, I was like, really, Mom? This never took place? And I dreamt this, just like I dreamt about the little gray men. Oh, yeah, she said, this is just a figment of your imagination. And I'm like, I don't think so, Mom. But she kept telling me that it was. And then about 2 years ago, now, mind you, she'd been speaking to people since 2013. So 2 years ago, I get a phone call and she tells me, she's in her 80s now. She tells me, I think you really need to come forward and go to the Historical Society and tell them what happened to us that night up at Lake Mansfield. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You told me that was all in my head. No, it really did happen. I just didn't want people to think you were nuts. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I said, well, I can't do anything right now. I have to find myself first after what you did to me, Mom. I was very upset about all that. That being said, I spent a year in counseling before I came forward. And in the meantime, I had run into Tommy Warner. And I didn't know him before then.
Yeah, he said he mentioned he's seen you on the craft.
Yeah, and I don't remember seeing Tommy, but I remember I ran into him at the Big Y right after I had spoken to my mom. And I knew him immediately when I saw him. It's like our eyes connected, and he was like my long lost brother. It was weird. And then I saw that he was writing this book. I didn't even know how we became friends on Facebook. I thought my husband was a friend of his because my husband knew everyone in high school. I wasn't someone that was out there in high school. I was in the art department. I really hung out with a very young art teacher. She was fresh out of college. She was a friend of mine. I was a senior. I had 2 other girlfriends that were in the art department. We were very close, but that was it. I didn't hang out with the cheerleading group and all that. I was very much into the arts. So that being said, I really thought he was my husband's friend. I saw that he was writing this book about UFOs. And my husband is very much into watching those shows, which I could never watch before because I was so afraid to watch them because of everything that happened to me as a child. And then again, as I got older. So I couldn't watch them before. And I thought, okay, well, I'll contact Tommy Warner and I'll ask him if, when the book comes out, if I can buy one for my husband. So I private messaged him and he said, can I call you? And I said, of course you can call me. This was after I had seen him at the Big Y. He called me up and he goes, you were there. And I knew I was there, but I didn't know that he was there because I hadn't seen him on this. And I didn't know that's what his book was about. And I was like, I got goosebumps when he told me that because I didn't know his story. I didn't know about the whole Netflix thing. I had no idea of what he was going to tell me. He said, can I come over and talk to you and your husband? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, this is crazy. I got my mother telling me something. And this I was told not to talk about my whole life.
And now you're put on the spotlight.
Yeah. And it's like my sister, my husband, this PTSD specialist, and Tom Warner and, Thom Reed, and these people they've really come forward and they've made it so I can actually watch a UFO film now and not freak out about it. I'm actually starting to be able to sleep better now. I used to sleep sitting up straight up. I find myself now in the morning, I'm almost sleeping laying down now, not all the way down, but further down. It's getting better. It's getting a little bit easier now. Thom Reed said to me, we're alive. We're alive. Nothing really, really horrible happened to us. They didn't take everything away from us. And I thought, he's right. He's really right. It's sad. It really hurts my feelings what my parents did to me. That part makes me really sad that my relationship is severed. But other than that, we're okay.
According to the Netflix show, you went out for ice cream.
What happened was my sister and I, we had to work that weekend. We worked all weekend long. I was 12. Janie was 14. I can still see the posters that were hanging up. It was Cactus Flower, Goldie Hawn was playing back then. And we cleaned the Mahawi Theater, two little girls cleaning the Mahawi Theater. But we were actually preteens and a teenager. And, we weren't these innocent little girls. I shouldn't make it sound like that. We were wild preteens. And we really wanted to just go out and smoke a cigarette. We didn't want to go hang out and go have ice cream. There was this rock called Penny Rock that we used to hang out at. We had a girlfriend whose mom smoked. We wanted to meet her at Penny Rock and go smoke cigarettes. That's what we wanted to do. And our parents insisted that we go for ice cream. So we got in the car. We went up for ice cream. We were sitting in the back seat. I can still remember smelling wool when we saw this thing. It was like all of a sudden we looked up and my father said, "Holy shit." And there was this bright, bright red orange glow over the lake. I mean, it was huge and it was just there. And it was like there. And my father starts the car up and we start screaming. And I knew it was coming from me. I knew it. I just knew it because they were always coming from me when I was little. And I'm like, "No, Dad, no." And we were screaming and my mother's going, "No, Joey, don't. And he wanted to follow it and started chasing it. And I remember smelling great, like this wool smell. And I asked my mom, why did I smell wool? Why was there a smell of wool? And she told me that it was because my dad's blanket, he had a gray army blanket in the back seat of the car. And my sister and I, we were in the back seat of the car. My brother was back there too. And we had our heads down screaming in the back seat of the car. So I must have been smelling that wool army blanket when I was screaming and crying. And then the next thing I can remember is being over Berkshire Heights, levitating. And when you levitate like that, when they do that to you, you can't move. It's just your eyes that are moving. It's just your eyes. You're stuck. And I remember being stuck there. And then my next memory is being on the craft. I only remember myself being in a room. It was like a metallic room. And I don't remember anyone else being in that room, just myself. And then my next memory is being in another room with other children. And then they would just disappear. One newspaper quoted me saying that they were classmates of mine. They were not classmates of mine. I never said that they were classmates of mine. I don't know who those children were. I had never seen them before. Thom said he saw me there, but I didn't know who Thom was. But there were definitely other children there. And then they would just vanish. Boom, boom. And then I woke up on Lake Mansfield and I had horrible stomach pains. My family was gone. And I remember I was wearing short cutoff jeans and a lime green shirt, 3/4 length sleeves. I remember that because I loved that shirt. I didn't want to let it go. You know, hey, you have a favorite sweater? That was my favorite sweatshirt. And bare feet. And I had to walk home. It was like a 5 or 10 minute walk home on a dirt road. and the sun wasn't quite up yet, but it was starting to come up. And I don't know what time it was because I didn't have a watch on, but it was definitely before. It's like early in the morning when the birds are just going to start to chirp.
So the abduction probably took all night then.
For me, it was an all night thing for sure. Yes. And my parents, I said to my sister, well, how did you guys get home? And she goes, Mom and I, we go over it and over it again, and we don't even remember driving home. We have no idea. She's there. I remember when you came home and you and I talking about it. My mom always locks the door. She's so anal about locking the doors. She's so afraid. She thinks that everyone is going to break into her house. I mean, I never lock my doors, but she always locks her doors, and she's so frightened. But that night or that morning when I came home, her back door was unlocked, and she never would do that. But I remember I walked up and everybody was sound asleep still. And I remember waking my sister up and climbing into bed with her, because I always slept with my sister because I was so afraid, always afraid. But Janie and I, we always looked out that window, and we always would watch UFOs. We still talk about it to this day. We would always watch UFOs over East Mountain. There's a lot that would be over at East Mountain. We still talk about that. They didn't bother me as much as I got older as they did when I was little. Once I was at the Castle Street house, except for that night. It was a bad night, but we used to watch them all the time there, Jane and I.
So do you think you were then targeted when the selected few that was abducted?
I believe that I was, for sure. Definitely, I believe that I was. And I believe that my son has had some experiences as well, my youngest.
Yeah, my notes here I had said I couldn't remember that town in New York. It was Hillsdale, New York.
Hillsdale's right. You go into Egremont, which is the next town from Great Barrington, and then Hillsdale is the next town from Egremont.
Yeah, because I had one from Hillsdale, one from Stockbridge, and one from Sheffield.
It's definitely a hot spot here. And I was told that it could be because we have a lot of limestone, and because of General Electric.
Right. Do you think that those kids you've seen that were disappearing one by one on the craft, do you think they know something today? They never came forward.
Absolutely. It could have been any of my friends that I've spoken to. I've had people that have called me, a young girl. Well, she's not so young anymore. None of us are young anymore. I have to laugh. I mean, when I talk about it, I think I'm 12 years old again. I'm right back in that place. But I had a girl call me who is much younger than me. A lot of people have found me because of my husband's website, because I privatized everything after this happened, thinking, oh God, I don't want anyone calling me. But actually I do. After, I did somebody asked me to do a show, and then I actually felt better talking about it after I did talk about it. And anyways, this girl called and left a message on my husband's machine. And she goes, I remember Melanie, and could you please ask her if she wouldn't mind calling me, if she remembers me? I was much younger than her, but I remember her. She worked at Out of Hand, and my brother had a horrible experience on Berkshire Heights in 1970, and he's never gotten over it. Would you please ask her to call me? And just because of some of the comments that she made, I remembered her, but if she hadn't said the comments, I didn't recognize her name. So I did call her back because of the comments. And one of them was the Berkshire Heights, because that's where I was stuck in my levitation. And there's no way she could have known that, because no one knew that information about me. And the same thing had happened to her brother on Berkshire Heights, which is bizarre. And that's before I'd even talked to him, spoken to him. So he had the same experience a year later, 1970, up at Berkshire Heights. And that poor young man had never, ever gotten over it. He's totally traumatized by it, and he will not speak to anyone. He'll talk to me about it. He'll talk to his sisters about it, but he's so frightened about it still to this day.
Yeah, I would imagine that, that's a traumatic experience. First of all, even seeing a UFO. I listened to an interview by Marcus Clarke, and he said that you guys were really courageous for coming forward because what it did, it will open up doors for others to come forward.
And people are coming forward, too.
But what's amazing to me is people don't want to give their name. I mean, about the event, but don't want their name mentioned. And that's okay, because I have a lot that I understand whatever position they're in, job-wise or family-wise, don't want their name out there.
I think more and more people are becoming relaxed. I think I might even be able to get that guy in the future to talk about it because his sister calls me now almost every Sunday. And they want to come and visit me. They want to come back here once the whole CB-19 thing is over. And I think if he sees that I'm okay now and I have a good support system now, and with the whole park that Thom is trying to do as a whole healing adventure for all of us, maybe he'll see that having a support system will be there for him, and he's not alone. He wasn't the only one that had to go through this. It was horrible for everyone. It's not something that was a glorifying adventure. None of us look at it that, oh, wow, this was cool. It wasn't cool. This is not cool.
And I think that's what Tom Warner was trying to put out there, that, to the one person, none of he's interviewed or asked by someone, how lucky you were to be, and he says, no, that's not, he wouldn't use that word at all.
No. Mm-mm.
But I was looking at some research I've been doing. In 2019, there was over 6,000 sightings last year, UFO sightings.
I'm afraid to go outside and look up at the sky. I really am. My husband will say to me, come on, let's go for a hike out in the woods. And why don't you just go out there and sit on the rock and call them down here? Because you can do that, And I always said, no, I'm not going to do that. Are you kidding me? You know how they just recently had this thing, it was on Facebook, that you can call them down just recently. Did you see that?
Yes.
And he was begging me to go do that. And I said, absolutely not. Are you crazy? I'm not going to do that for you.
Right.
Begging me. And I said, no, I am not going to do that because this is not fun.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea. This is not fun. It's not something you want to do. And you're playing with fire. And I said, I'm not going to partake in that. This is not a fun thing to do. So I refused to do it.
The silence. There's no noise coming from this craft. From 1952 to 1969, that's 94, 98, there's no sound. Could you verify that while you're on a craft? There was no sound?
I couldn't hear anything. I could hear like a hum. There's like a slight humming, and I remember a coolness. There's like a coolness, but when you say there's no sound, it's almost like everything, I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like everything that you're hearing, though, is in your head. It's almost like a mental telepathy thing. It's not like you're hearing stuff outside, like you and I would hear things, but you're hearing things almost as if you have headphones on. So there's noises happening, but they're all happening inside your head. Or if you're have you ever had an MRI done, or where they put things on you? It's almost that type of a sound. But then it stops and there's silence.
And that's what I was talking to one of my friends who was involved in one of these chases of a UFO because he's a police officer. He kind of said the same thing, that there's complete silence, but there's like a slight hum. At some points, it would magnify the senses around you. Like he said, it's hard to explain. Like you could almost smell the flowers in the field, hear crickets chirping really loud. Then it would be complete silence.
It's hard to explain it. It's bizarre.
So you don't have any books, any plans?
I'm not a writer. No, I'm a painter. I just paint. I don't paint pictures of UFOs. I paint landscapes, flowers, my cats, my dogs. I don't paint UFOs either. No. People keep saying, why don't you write a book? Why don't you write a book? Your whole life has been interesting. At least do a journal for your grandchildren. But I'm not a writer. I am not a writer.
You know, I do find a lot of things are tied in with the American Native Indian. It's really cool when I reach out to different people like yourself, and I always say, oh, I got to put Berkshires on my bucket list, you know.
Well, you would love it here. We've got the Indian burial ground here, and my friend Emma Eastman, my Dakota friend, the elder, he came and stayed with me after I went out to South Dakota, and I showed him around. And he did a blessing on my other house that's in Stockbridge. And it's really pretty incredible. In fact, I think I started to tell you that when I started doing some research, because my mother kept telling me that those little gray men were all in my head, I started thinking, well, maybe they were the little people, because I don't know if you've done research on the little people. They were the helpers. They were probably midgets they are midgets that are born into the tribes of the Native Americans. And they were some of them were shaman, or they were just the helpers of the Native Americans. So I started looking into them thinking, well, maybe these were ghosts of the Native Americans from King Philip's War, and they were killed along the Housatonic River because the Great Wigwam was where the Congo Church was. So I started researching that and King Philip's War, but it didn't add up because they didn't look like that. They definitely didn't look like that. They were the Greys. So that's what got my interest in Native American history, and that's what brought me out to South Dakota. So I did a lot of research. Everything that happened for a reason, because I did a lot of learning about the First Nations people because of it. So everything happens for a reason. I'm not sorry that it happened because I've met a lot of great people, and it took me on some good travels trying to find out what happened.
Almost everybody I talk to, I get a very interesting, history lesson or something I didn't, I'm always learning from different UFOs or ghost stories, so it's always interesting.
Of course, for sure. Well, it even took me into the travels to go down to the Mayan ruins, which I know there's a connection there with the UFO phenomena too. It's just so interesting to see the drawings on the walls. And a friend of mine in Belize, they claim that they see UFOs down there all the time. So there's a connection for sure. I don't know so much that they want to harm us or hurt us. I don't think that they intentionally want to harm us. I think they're more concerned about what we're doing to the earth. And at the same time, I do question, though, if our government isn't involved in it as well. I have questions. I have a lot of questions.
Well, Melanie, I really thank you for your time and your stories. And I know it's been crazy since the Netflix. I was glad to contact you and happy you got back with me, along with the other two Toms and some other people that I've contacted through my research. It takes a lot to come out and tell your story, what you witnessed and experienced.
Thank you, Al. I've enjoyed it. And I've also enjoyed a lot of the story that you sent me. I loved the other day, by the way. I really enjoyed that story.
Thank you, Melanie, for that fantastic interview. My plan is to travel to the Berkshires, to Great Barrington, Sheffield, and see the sites where this thing was spotted back in 1969. I still have yet to make that trip. I really would love to make it this year and at the latest next year. I'm not getting any younger, so yeah, I would really love to go meet Melanie, her husband, Tom Warner, and his family. But coming up next, speaking of Tom Warner, coming up next is Tom Warner, which will conclude this week's 3-part interview with part 2 of the Berkshires. And next week will be the roundtable. Conclusion of my 8-part series was 5 years ago. I know it's a little confusing, but last week was 3 parts. Today was 3 parts, and next week will be the round table. So here's my interview with Thom Warner. Well, I'm excited today to have Thom Warner on the show. He's the author of a book coming out, Beyond the Stars. Thom is also the young man who was abducted in the new Netflix Unsolved Mysteries series they just released. It was episode number 5, Berkshire's UFO. So how you doing tonight, Thom?
I'm doing better than I did that night, Al.
I imagine your life's been like a hectic whirlwind.
Do you know, Al? You know, when they first told me Netflix, they wanted to give me a warning because knowing what was coming. Of course, I didn't necessarily believe them, but everybody recognizes me wherever I go. So today I was doing construction work, helping out a buddy, and I tore my back of my jeans, and I'm like, I still had to pick up some things for my family, right? So I go into a store. I'm looking scruffy. I have a shirt on me that is, just a scruffy shirt, ripped jeans, and a woman's in back of me, and she goes, "You're Thom Warner." And I'm like, "No, I'm not."
Well, that depends. Do you like me or don't you?
Well, she says, "No, we watched you last night on Unsolved Mysteries, Berkshire UFO." And I'm like, "Oh," and she goes, "No, you did really great." And I said, "Oh, thank you so much." She goes, "It was very disturbing." And I said, "Yeah, it was for me too." So.
Well, before we get into the abduction that happened in 1969, are you still in the Great Barrington area?
Al, I live in the same house that we've had here, my family, for 6 generations. They first moved in here in 1835, and I'm in the same house I grew up in. Where this took place was right out my door.
That's awesome. You're still in the same area.
Same area, same house.
And as a child, before the abduction, did you believe? I mean, if you can remember back that far, do you remember believing in like UFOs or ghosts or anything like that?
Well, I always had mental telepathy since I was a child, and it was a learning experience what it was, and I had a number of instances which are in my book, by the way, that make you wonder how far back did these experiences go, and so I never heard of a UFO up until that summer of 1969, and the first time I heard of a UFO, we were up on vacation up on Lake Champlain, a little town called Willsboro Point it was. And we were sitting by a campfire, and my mother had gone up, and my father was, just talking to a couple of us boys, and he got a real serious look on his face, and he started telling the story of a UFO. Of course, I still hadn't heard of a UFO story. I didn't even know what it was, And he was telling how his boss was renting a place somewhere over in Vermont across the lake, and the wife came frantically home and said there was a UFO, and the husband said, calm down, I will go and look at it in the morning. And the next morning when he went out, it was like a 30 to 40 foot circle burnt. The grass was all burnt just to a crisp, and perfect circle. And my father looked at us and he says, if you ever see one of these UFOs, you boys run. And my father had this horrified look on his face, which I'm like, it just sent chills up me at the time. And I'm like, well, I'll never see one of those. And that'll never happen,
Right.
But little did I know that was a little over a month later, it did happen. Less than that, really.
I was doing some research on the Berkshire Mountain area and Great Barrington and Sheffield. And is this known for heavy UFO activity and paranormal, or was this a one-time event?
Well, at first I didn't really think it was, until all of a sudden I started doing some research myself. And of course, after the show aired, so many people came forward to tell me, yeah, well, they saw a UFO. And a lot of it was right in my neighborhood. In fact, in 2017 and 18, two students at Simon's Rock, which is a half a mile from my house, reported seeing a UFO on 2 different years. And that's less than a half a mile from my house.
More of my research also brought up the fact that in 1969 was the first lunar landing. So do you think that landing on the moon, and this is according to these reports, after the moon land, there was tons and tons of UFO activity in 1969 with all the satellites and all that, and everything's in space now, that it's maybe,
I mean,
generating more activity?
Who really knows? I mean, you see what happened, Neil Armstrong. Of course, we were into the man landing on the moon. I mean, that was incredible. I mean, it was like, my God, what are they going to do when they step down? Are they going to sink out of sight? No one knew,
Right. I remember watching it as a child. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were just thrilled with it, and there was a point where, they lost communication with them. And, I remember my father saying, I hope they get back to that other side, and I remember the whole country was excited. The whole world was excited with Apollo 13 when they landed on the moon. It was like, wow, that was a first,
Right.
Life was, I was just, starting to get into watching baseball and so much was happening that year, but little did I know what was going to happen on September 1st, though. I mean,
now, are you surprised by all the attention that has been generated since the release of the Netflix series?
Well, yes and no, because there's only been one other person who has been actually witnessed in a UFO beam and disappear, and that was Travis Walton. And so when that was revealed that I was the second, or actually the first, because mine was in 1969 and Travis's was 1985, that was pretty shocking to a lot of people. It wasn't shocking to me because it happened to me,
Mm-hmm.
And I really had no idea what the reaction was going to be. The only reason I came forward on all this was because I knew how I felt inside, where, we kept this story pretty quiet for like 50 years, which, in a small town, it's pretty hard to keep something that secret that long. I mean, it would come out in dribs and drabs, but, so once it was out, the reaction, I was more surprised how many just absolutely recognized me no matter where I went. That was, I think, the biggest surprise.
Yeah, because a lot of people thought that the new Unsolved Mysteries, without, like a narrator like Robert Stack, it just wouldn't work, and it just was the opposite. I mean, it has really, and according to the a couple directors I've listened to their interviews on other podcasts, was that it just took off like wildfire, and it's one of the most watched unsolved mysteries in history.
It was for a number of reasons. It's because it was so shocking, and the reason it was shocking was it happened. So many people saw it, and they didn't see it from a distance. Like, the neighbor watched me from probably 60 to 75 feet away. That's close up to see someone disappear in a UFO beam.
Right.
And, in like the other cases, it was like no one wanted to talk about it. Like Jane Green, for instance, her kids saw it because they lived down the street from me. And her kids saw something. The mother saw something, but yet they never spoke of it. They just didn't talk. No one talked about it. So coming forward, it was good for everybody to come forward and talk. And then I began to think, in the process, there must be so many more people out there, and people just started contacting me and thanking me, saying how brave I was to come forward. And I'm like, it's okay now.
Marcus Clarke, one of the directors of the Berkshire UFO series, he said that it gave you guys a lot of credit for coming forward, and also it will open up doors for other people to come forward, which I found out through my investigations here. A lot of people did come forward in 1969 that was never documented. I mean, like the radio station.
Well, I'll tell you something about the radio station. So the radio station, they didn't say a lot about it, in their news broadcasts. They said enough where they said that, I remember them saying there was something funny going on in the South Berkshires. People were reporting seeing a UFO. And I'm going like, I was just relieved that I wasn't the only one that saw the UFO, and I didn't know how anybody else's experiences were or anything. I was just relieved I wasn't the only one. And it was like, okay, that's confirmed. It's good. And they didn't get into anything else. But about in 89, I know that it was the year my daughter was born, and they did a rebroadcast on the subject from WSBS, and I don't know who it was. It was famous at the time, but they had a talk show host, and you could call in, and they'd forward, to talk to the person. But by the time I got the nerve up to talk, the woman who answered the phone at WSBS said, I'm sorry, that was the last call. And she says, you're not one of the Warner boys. And I said, yeah, I am. And she goes, we watched the UFO right over your house. But at the time, I didn't think of anything. I didn't take the person's name down or anything like that. I just go, yeah, okay, great,
It was astounding that, like the police department, if you look at the police records, I mean, how many calls came in for sightings?
Well, most of the reporting was really to Tom J, because people were comfortable with him. Yeah, he said to Jane, you must have been smelling swamp gas. That's actually in my book, by the way. And it was a reference to a story where the government blamed these people seeing a UFO on swamp gas coming out of a swamp. So that was like a way of saying you were smoking weed or something, They just said, oh, no, you smelled swamp gas or something like, it's your imagination. But, oh, geez, Mrs. Green, she was mad as a hornet at him,
You call somebody a liar, basically, and there's a lot of people just don't believe no matter what.
Well, I could really, honestly, I could care less what people, you tell a story, you have a witness, it's everybody knew it was true, I mean.
And back in 1969, there was no social media, cell phones to take video or pictures with, GPS tracking. So, it was basically...
Did not talk about it from sibling to sibling.
Like, were you bullied or harassed in school for even mentioning it, or didn't you mention it?
At first, we didn't talk about it. It was kept out. There's something went out here. We didn't talk. We were pretty protective. We lived 2.5 miles out into the country, so we were pretty, no one really knew about it, but slowly it came out. I was, by the time I was like 12 or 13, I was getting a little bit bigger. No one really picked on me. But, I did have an incident when I was 13 and got in a discussion, and somehow it came up, and I'm not one to back down on my story or anything. And so I don't remember who it was, but they said to the priest, he's seen a UFO, and the priest put his arm around me and says, you have Satan in you. I was pretty hot. I was mad, And I'm like, how dare you say that to me? And I walked out the door and walked home it was like Catholic school. Yeah, I walked home. I just left. I was really upset, That really stood with me, So some people, ask me about, because I get into this stuff in the book, because my favorite saying always is, listen to the angels, fly with the aliens. And the meaning of that is we don't know exactly what's out past all the way out to the next galaxy and the next galaxy. We don't know. We just have no idea. And how I look at it is, once upon a time, everybody thought the Earth was flat, and they were flat earthers. The Earth's flat, and some guy somehow discovers that the Earth isn't flat, and there's some really good fiction if you keep going. And now everybody knows the Earth's round. Yeah, there are some people who still believe it's flat, and you go off the edge, right? But anyway, so here I am, 10 years old, telling people that there are other planets like Earth past that we can't see. And I was like someone who said, like, the Earth isn't flat back when everybody thought it was. But now, all these years later, all the things I said are starting to be slowly proven.
I really wish that the radio station WSBS would have talked with DJ Tom J. I wish there was some backup tapes of that, to hear today.
Yeah, it was the first announcement was very short. It would have been like a very short announcement. But the 1989 program, I wish they had kept, because so many people called in, and of course those people are probably long gone. So we're fortunate, that Jane Green, who's in her 80s, and Tom's mother came forward and told her story with her son, and those people are few and far between. So you just have to be thankful they're still around to confirm the story.
But to give DJ Tom J credit, I mean, he did call the police and ask if there was any calls on that.
Yeah, I couldn't confirm that conversation. What was interesting about the police report, and getting in the police reports, after Unsolved Mysteries had aired, I get a call from this fella, and he was like a 30-year veteran of Vermont State Police, and he said, "I have a story to tell you." And I said, "Yeah, go ahead. You got my attention." And he said, "My wife watched the program, when the first night it came out, and the next morning she goes, 'You got to watch this program tonight.'" And he said, "I sat down and watched the program," and he said, "but when it came to your painting that you had done that was on the show," he said, "I sat straight up. My hair went on the back of my neck, stood up," and he goes, "That's it. That's what I saw." And at the time, he was in a small town off Long Island, on the North Shore of Long Island. His father was chief of police, and they saw exactly what I saw, and exactly what I portrayed in my watercolor painting. I'm a watercolor artist. And I did the painting of my abduction. And he says, "That's exactly what I saw." He says, "It went right across the sound, and I blew up a map, and it was going straight for the Berkshires." And he goes, so when his father got home, who was chief of police, he said, "Dad, this happened." He goes, "Yeah, we're getting calls on it and stuff." So they are currently looking to see if there were any calls written down on that night, because the records may have been kept. So we're checking on that. So it's ongoing.
That'd be nice if they could find that.
Yeah. He's away right now on vacation, but he's going to do a follow-up within a month. We're going to know about a follow-up on that. But we're hoping.
Well, I got to be optimistic. Now, on the Netflix series, they had on the Unsolved Mysteries, they gave a timeline on how they think the UFO traveled. And I know we had mentioned earlier that I don't think you said you were too big on a timeline because it was everywhere.
That was my impression. I mean, I don't know who knows if it exactly went the way it did. I mean, that was just introducing one character to the next. And the truth is, when Jane saw it, it went up over the mountain. Now, did it come directly to my house? Did it go to Housatonic where other people had seen it? Did it go from Housatonic to Sheffield and then back up? We'll never know. I didn't think that was so important as showing, the closeness of where this was, in relationship to where everyone was,
Yeah, can you believe it's been 51 years? 51 years this year, right?
It's 51 years this year. I mean, it seems like to me, it's etched in my mind. And it was like, I can just see it. I mean, it's not like it's this happy event. Some people are like, "Oh, you're so lucky." No, I wasn't. It just scared the daylights out of me, man.
Yeah, now we're getting to the part to where you can share your
story.
Right.
It was a dark, stormy night.
Yeah.
No, okay. No, I got okay. So it was September 1st, and it was kind of like a night, like I'm hearing right now. We call them the August crickets because they start in August. The crickets, and they'll go from August right through. I'd say middle of September, but they're really loud at night, and so I said to my mother, I want to go over and do coloring because I always went over to my neighbors, the Shaws, and Debbie, who was a little bit older than me, always did coloring with me. Her sister Jane talked about it in the TV show, and we went over and I'm just coloring away, and all of a sudden I get this mental telepathy. Now I've had mental telepathy before, but this was so strong that I stopped coloring. I got up and I walked toward the window, and I said, Debbie, I think I got to go home. And she goes, why? I think God must be talking to me from those clouds. I got to go home, telling me I have to go home right now. And I ran out to where the kitchen was, and I made eye contact with Jane. Jane was on the phone and that over to my right, and the grandmother was over by the window, another window to the left. And they had this just startled look on their face, and I realized it was because the look on fear on me. And I said, I got to go. And I just ran out the door, and you went through one room, and then you get on the final room, which was like a hall, which was the coal room, where the coal room was, which was dark, and I bolted out of there, and I was flying. And then I got to this point where there's a big rock or boulder that was in the yard, and it was a path. We'd gone back and forth so many times to the Shaws to the Warners, Shaws to the Warners. There was actually a dirt path. And when I hit that spot, all of a sudden, all the sounds, the crickets, everything the noise just got sucked away. And it's like time went in a slow motion. It was broken down like to the milliseconds. And I thought something felt odd, and I looked to my left, and a UFO just dropped right out of the sky. And it was probably, I'm guessing, anywhere from 35, 40 feet above my head. It was low. It was low. And I'm staring at this thing, and because it was so surreal. You want to take in every detail, and I'm seeing lights, color lights like I've never seen the colors before. I mean, it's hard. You can't describe something you've never seen before. And part of this UFO was going in one direction, and the next section was going another direction, and the final section was on the bottom, was spinning in another direction. But it wasn't making a sound, and a beam come on. And this beam was like the color, I would say like a whitish blue, but just intense brightness. And my hands jerked back, and it was like I got air sucked out of me, and then I'm in like a fog. And the one thing I remember the most was seeing this girl crouched in the corner that I later identified as Melanie. When I got in high school, that's who it was. I eventually saw her once in high school. She was older than me. I was coming through a door in high school and opened up the door, and there she was. And I was like, it was frightful.
Yeah, I've seen you before.
Well, yeah. Well, I knew where I saw her before. That's why it was like, oh my God, And I remember seeing other kids, and anytime I remember when I was seeing another kid, I'd look down, and then I seen what looked like some sort of alien, and then another human-like. And then I remember seeing a table, and then fixated on these some sort of panel. I remember and then different instruments and lights, and then it was over. And when it was over, it was like a blink of an eye, and then I came to just as I was being let down onto the ground. And only instead of when I was running towards my house. Only this, I was being laid down facing the Shaw's house, only near my property. And I was in a UFO beam. And then my brother yells to me, run, run. I can't move. The beam's holding me in place. And mental telepathy again said, we'll be done with you. We'll be done in a minute. We'll be done in a minute. And just relax. We'll be done in a minute. And in a minute, we're done. The beam went off. I was able to stand up. I looked at the UFO. It slowly rose. I had to slowly rise to clear the trees. And then, whoop, off it went.
I think we talked earlier about when I was telling you about the UFO over my county in 1994. And I found it astounding that the UFO that was reported in 1952 over Washington, D.C., and 1966 in Portage County, Ohio, and 1994 in Trumbull County, and yours, they all have a similarity that there was no sound.
No sound. Everyone said the same thing. The Reed said there's no sound. I said there are no sounds. You know, everyone said that. They're just like, it's not only that this UFO was making no sound, there was no sounds around, which was bizarre. You know,
right? And that's what I hear from, like, when I was telling you about the 10 local law department officials chasing this UFO in '94 for 50 miles, and there's no sound. And I found that odd that even in your case, you know, you're on the craft and there's no sound.
No sound. That's what was the bizarre part. Now, what they didn't tell you in the show, okay, there's a couple of things they didn't tell you in the show, was after it left here, it was spotted close up, just like me, a similar experience up in Willsboro, New York, where we were on vacation. And the thing is, it went over a family, and the mother came out, and she's screaming for the kids to come in. And the brother of all these girls, he's under the beam saying, take me, just joking, right? It didn't take him, by the way. But it was in that area looking around. And she said, and she described it, and each one described it to me the same way as what I saw in my painting. They described it the same. On the bottom, there was these just bright lights and a beam and everything. And on the outside, they had different colors that were going around. And they said it crossed Lake Champlain, and she said, and I quote, in a damn split second, 1 second, and it went across the lake. Now, that's 6 miles. That calculates out to over 20,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, that's the pilot I just spoke to recently for the United States Navy. Just told me the same thing, that, you know, they're going Mach 2 speed, and this thing passed them like they...
Standing still. Yeah, I mean, incredible speed.
And this came from a naval pilot, you know.
Now, I want you to think about that a second. So we're up at Lake Champlain, right? We come home back to Massachusetts. A UFO comes over me, abducts me, and goes back to where we were on vacation. Now, I don't know what the odds are, you know, but that's incredible.
That is, yeah.
Now, what got even more incredible, Al, is 2 weeks later, it happened again to me, which was not in the show.
So you had actually 3 abductions?
Well, the second one, no, I didn't. I wasn't abducted up at Lake Champlain. I was here at the time.
Okay.
So on September 1st, 1969, it went to where I was.
Oh, I see. I understand. Okay.
Now, those kids were interviewed by the Plattsburgh Air Force Base the next day. We grew up during the summers as teenagers. We'd all lay on the beach. We'd all be looking up at the sky. We're all looking for the same thing, UFOs, or seeing if we see anything. None of us came and told our stories about that until I was in an interview on Coast to Coast, and my friend, actually Thom Reed was in that interview too, and it was Coast to Coast with Dr. J. Andy Ellis, I believe was his name. And my friend, she was in Italy listening to the story, and she got back to me and said, same night with us, and then told her story. And I couldn't believe that we were friends all those years, and we never talked about it.
Yeah, do you find it easier to talk about now?
Well, it is, but, you know, I go into a lot of stuff into my book, not just my, abduction, but also I go into the Men in Black, talking about the Men in Black, you know, deep conspiracy, you know, governments, you know, beliefs, and, you know, human alien hybrids and events that happened afterwards, because the events never stopped. They went on my whole entire life. But 2 weeks after that happened, on September 1st, I was having a catch with my brother. I threw the ball to my brother. He threw it back to me. I threw it to him. He threw it to me. I threw the ball. I released the ball. The ball went 15 feet, stopped, and went the other way past me. And I was shocked. I'm like, what? And as I'm total confusion chasing the ball, my other two brothers are running up with the neighbor who was Jane's brother. And he's yelling to me, did you see the UFO? Did you see the UFO? It was right over Tommy's head. And I'm like, oh, not again. I'm like, oh.
Do you feel like you're being targeted, or?
I knew I was. Wasn't thinking. I knew I was, you know? And so they go, there it is. And I'm looking up, and this thing is using mental telepathy and talking to me, saying, you're okay now.
Getting back to your book, tell us about the book you have coming out.
Yeah, well, I wrote the book really because I really felt I wanted to help people because, you know, there were things, these events that happened from, you know, like one instance, for instance, at 4, there was an attempted kidnapping of me. And these were like, it would be almost like if Barbie dolls were trying to kidnap you. There were 6 in the car, and the 3 guys looked the same, and the 3 girls looked the same. They all had short blondish hair, and the girls all had blonde hair. And it was like, it was bizarre. And it was mental telepathy telling me, look, call to your grandpa, but, you know, don't use your voice. And I did. Then he came out, and he was a sharpshooter for the New York National Guard, 71st Division New York National Guard. And he said, driver, this car moves, you're dead. And he says, I want my grandson. And he walked up to the car, and he looked at these people, and I was waiting for him to call the police or something. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. And he said, Tommy, we're not going to talk about this. And we didn't.
Wow, you've had a pretty eventful life. I give you that.
Well, yeah. I mean, you think it would get, after, you think, oh my God, after you're abducted, September 1st, 1969, that's going to be it. No, it was the beginning.
Right.
And so I was like, I had all these secrets that I had. I mean, I learned a lot of secrets. And I even came in contact with someone whose father was in the Men in Black. And she goes, you can't talk. You have to stop talking. She goes, you know too much.
Yeah, I know in all my investigations on UFOs and talking to different people, I basically was told by a few people from the State Department and the Air Force just to basically back off.
Back off, and I did back off. And I did back off all through my 30s. And events kept happening, and I'm like, and it got to the point where I was getting this message: you need to talk now. And so I wrote the book because I felt I was a messenger, and I have a message to say to humanity, and that's it, and that's why I wrote the book. So you'll read some pretty wild stuff in there, man. It's like you read it. I read it and it scares me, and I wrote it,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if I personally didn't know that these things that I lived, they would happen, and I'd question them, and I was like, that really did happen. I'd even go back and talk to people, and they said, do you remember this? Yeah. And they'd confirm everything.
That was kind of brought up to me by the person I talked to through the State Department, which I can't release his name.
Of course you can't.
No way. But what he was telling me was, he just threw the question at me, with the lunar landing of 1969, the increase of activity after the landing, and it's well documented. Isn't it kind of ironic that was at the end of that year when they decided to close up Project Blue Book?
Yeah, Project Blue Book was just kind of like, don't worry, people, we're looking into it. Here's our cases. That is a bunch of hoo-ha, because, you take the September 1st case, right, 1969. The Plattsburgh Air Force came down and interviewed those kids. I knew personally that they did. They knew that they had some of this stuff on radar, because you can go back and get declassified stuff, and they talk about UFOs, and yet they're not in Project Blue Book. And why didn't they put that? I mean, obviously people saw it, but for some reason I think they had enough where they go, okay, there's nothing here now. We're all good now. We're all good. Turn off your porch lights. We're all good here.
Right.
And then it went on, and then you had, for instance, Jimmy Carter says, okay, when I'm president, we're going to tell the truth. You know, Jimmy Carter, good Christian man, he's all about the truth, and he gets president. He does make president, and the CIA director comes up and says, Mr. President, this is a need-to-know basis, and you do not need to know.
Exactly. Well, there's a trickle-down effect there, you know, where you're not supposed to talk about certain things, and that includes the president. You know, kind of like when Kennedy wanted to take control of the NASA program, you know, John F. Kennedy, and that was shot down. And I believe it's on tape about Hillary Clinton was involved with the UFO program, and same as, like you said, Jimmy Carter, and then all three were basically silenced on it.
Yeah, I understand why. I mean, I can only say one TV program. They learned their lesson from War of the Worlds. Talking about my book, you know, I talked to my aunt back in the day, you know, and she was telling me about when that program came on. A lot of people came into their houses. They weren't there at the beginning, and they said, "This is only a a TV program. This is not real." But other people, like my aunt, who came into the room, they turned it on, and they're hearing this stuff, and they're like, you know, Martians and UFOs and all this stuff's happening. And my grandfather, he just sat there. And when she found out that it wasn't real, she goes, I was mad as hornets at him. And the whole thing was people were really panicking. And, you know, it was Ronald Reagan who came out and said, you know, we have more in common than we don't have in common. And if we were fighting one particular enemy, we'd have to be united. And what he's referring to was outer space. We're so vulnerable because we don't have it. We think we're so advanced and the whole bit. And yet we can look at the early 80s and we see those big cell phones that are about 3 feet big, you know, and now we kind of laugh at them.
Right.
And technology goes at like the speed of light, you know, and everything's always constantly changing.
And I'm thinking myself, by talking to a couple of my friends that were involved in that chase in 1994 in our county, who were police officers, and like they said, you know, they're adamant that it was not man-made. Number one, number two
right.
is it was so more advanced than we will probably see in our lifetime. You know, so
of course,
at any time, if they wanted to take them out, it would have. You know, that's just that simple. I mean,
right. You know, so some people, the question I often get asked is this: are they hostile? Well, if they were hostile, they would have wiped our butts off a long time ago. You know?
Yeah. Right.
And so if that's the case, you know, we're at the mercy. You know, really.
Right. In that episode, it said that when you were running out that back door to run home because, you know, the voices in your head.
Right.
Because what I've been hearing is, you know, the people around your area was seeing what you actually drew. You know, what you actually painted, they saw.
You know, it was pretty damn accurate, the painting. You know, it really was. It was a good depiction, you know. You know, the thing about, did I have changes to me? Yeah, I think so. I really do. And you know, I had someone wrote a letter to me saying, you know, maybe your DNA was somehow changed. I don't know. I mean, how would I really know? You know, but it did affect me in the way my ability to understand mental telepathy. And another, you know, this isn't right up your alley here, was when people died, they could talk to me. It sounds bizarre, but it was true, you know. And I write about that in my book, and it's like, you know, it's not a real, you know, I'm going to get a good 8 hours sleep kind of thing here, you know. I feel like I'm always helping, you know. I mean,
yeah, and I think if anything good can come out of this, you know, and helping other people,
Right.
Getting through events, maybe something like you went through, that they can relate now because, you were brave enough to come forward with your story along with all the others,
I find this, that people find me, and there's an expression, there are no accidents, there are only appointments. We meet people for a reason, if you're in tune to that. And like for myself, every single important person that came into my life was there for a reason. And it was up to me to understand that reason. And it took me a while to accept that. It really did. I mean, I was like, why did I meet this person and they go out of my life or something, especially when I was in my early 20s or something, gone, And I'm like, well, that wasn't right. Why did they leave?
Yeah.
They all had it's a reason there. And it's like events would happen. I'd see events before they would happen. I'd end up, I went through a stage where I ended up saving people, literally drownings, a number of times on drownings.
Yeah, because you don't really know what your calling is going to be, and what's handed to you.
Yeah, but I sort of know it was coming, and it's not like you hey, guess what, Al? Tomorrow you're gonna save someone from dying.
You're right,
and you're gonna do that because we're gonna prove that this is real. It's not a fun feeling.
What's really cool about having this job, and talking to so many different people around the world, really, in the United States, and finding out different spots I want to put on my bucket list. Now I put yours on there. Hopefully next year I plan on coming to.
Well, just so you know, Al, that you're welcome to stay with us at the Warner homestead.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I hope you don't mind. Occasionally, there's a ghost in our house. Okay. But don't worry, they're only my great grandparents and relatives and that sort of thing. So you're all good. You'll be coming because you're going to be looking up at the sky, and I'm sitting out by the fire pit, looking up and saying like, "Wow."
But I was looking at some of these old pictures, like that bridge in Sheffield, and it used to be a bridge that you could actually go across, drive across, walk across. Now it looks like there's posted in front of it. It's like it's blocked off.
Well, what happened was the first bridge, it was the oldest covered bridge in the state of Massachusetts. And then some kids got down there and they started a fire in the middle of winter, and just to keep warm, and the bridge caught fire and burned. Right, gone. And so it went from the oldest covered bridge in Massachusetts to the newest one, but they did a wonderful job replicating it. So they decided to just shut off that road. But I was fortunate. Back in 1979, I happened to be at a friend's place, and we went for a run, and we went down the same road where Thom Reed lived. That was off Kellogg Road there, and down Boardman Street, and then we'd come down that lane, and it was, I'm telling you, I didn't know about Tom's, that's where he had his event or anything. But I'm telling you, that was one spooky place.
Mm-hmm.
And when I hit that bridge, there was like bats all around me, and it was a full moon. I'm telling you, we ran through there so fast, and it's like, wow, this is really creepy. But back then, you could still, believe it or not, even back as far as like 1979, it wasn't blocked off yet. So on the new one, when they put up the new one, they said, no, we're not going to have any traffic through here. That was it. When they replaced it, they decided right away they weren't going to have traffic.
It's just not safe, or?
No, actually, the new bridge you could drive across. It was no problem, but they decided to shut off the road.
Because the activity? I mean, paranormal activity, or?
Well, it was just a road that wasn't really used. It was rarely used. I mean, even back then, it was, people just didn't go down that road. I mean, Because your covered bridge looks like I live in a town, Newton Falls, Ohio, and we have the second oldest covered bridge in the state, and ours is still, it's one lane bridge you can travel across, and then. Yeah, that's how this was.
It reminds me a lot of your bridge if you go online and look at it, and our zip here is 44444. A little village we live in. It's not even a city, but It did remind me a lot of your covered bridge.
It's a beautiful covered bridge. It really is. I mean, people go down there just to see the covered bridge and everything. I mean, it's not that you couldn't drive over it. You know, it was designed for that.
Plus, I'd love to see the Berkshire mountain. You know, I hear that's really beautiful.
Well, the Berkshires are. You know, I mean, they're very scenic. A lot of people come up from New York or Boston, and of course they have Tanglewood and all this. You know, very many tourist areas. You know,
when I first heard about that on Netflix, you know, I'm like, Berkshire UFO. I was like, what's Berkshires? Is it a place, or, you know?
It's a county. It's Berkshire County.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in fact, the James Taylor song on the 1st of December, all covered with snow. So was the turnpike from Stockbridge to Boston. Though the Berkshires seemed dreamlike because of kind of that frosting. You know, that was it.
Well, Tom, we're getting near the end here, and anything you want to say?
Yeah. Well, in closing, you know, of course, I'd say, read my book if you want to know the whole story, but also watch the Berkshire UFO, you know, and, you know, just keep an open mind to this stuff. And my whole message was that we have to take care of each other, and we have to take care of this earth, because on technology, if we want to, you know, advance humanity, we have to survive. And we're not doing a very good job at that right now. And there's too much hatred in the world, and, you know, too much greed. And, you know, we have to really consider what we have here, right out here on Earth. Because, you know, eventually, if we needed to get off this place, you have to have the technology to get off. And you're not going to, you know, fly at the speed of light or whatever. You're not going to be able to do it in a Model T Ford, you know?
Exactly.
So,
well, I'd love the title of your book, Beyond the Stars.
That's my whole thing, is I've been given these images of another planet, and that's the whole thing. It's Beyond the Stars. The title says it all. It's going to be available just about everywhere once it breaks. And
right, I'm going to put all links at the bottom of the podcast. So, all right, Tom, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you for talking, and you know, thank you for reaching out to me here in the Berkshires in Great Barrington, and watching the show Berkshire's UFO on Unsolved Mysteries. It was a spooky night for sure.
Thank you, Tom Warner. Thank you, Melanie Kirchdorfer. Thank you, Thom Reed. Stop back next week. I'll have the conclusion of the roundtable. I love doing that. I had podcast hosts and special guests that stopped in, and even responses from the stars themselves. Next week, the conclusion, the roundtable. I'm your host, Al Cooley, host of Ghost in the Valley podcast.